Hello, angels. Welcome back. Music Corner, as always. It's me, Lav, here recording a EP kind of lazy Sunday video, the least scripted thing I've recorded for this channel in at least a couple months. Really getting back to my roots. And today we're turning to the sort of generic and easily malleable world of underrated music that I've dug into before, and it's really just a fun experiment for me to look at all of the records from this decade, the 2020s, that I've liked so far, and see what I think isn't getting the caliber of attention that it deserves. Now, I'm not really here to just pitch up some easy, critical darlings that may be too abstract or experimental to achieve mainstream success. That's kind of a cop-out version of underrated. The albums I'm going to talk about today, I honestly think could even appeal to the sort of rate your music and best ever albums crowd. They're dynamic and occasionally quite experimental records, and the kind of thing that I think, if given a fair shake by a lot of music listeners, they would really enjoy. Keep in mind now that it is May of 2023 when I am recording this, and as much as I wish I could stop it, time will continue moving on, and records will be released in the future that will also maybe be potentially underrated. This is certainly not a list that I did a whole ton of research or development for. It is just some records I think deserve a better shake, and some albums that I want to point to your attention from recent years that maybe you haven't heard of but would really enjoy. So let's stop talking in circles around it and just do it already, starting with one of the records that I'm most confident in my assessment of, the Whiston album from last year, Quiet as Kept. Now, I'm not going to patronize the entire genre of electronic music the way that some people do by saying that it can't, shouldn't, or doesn't often have concept albums, but I do think that the style and presentation of electronic music often lends itself to be less likely to present something like a concept album. And that's what makes this Whiston record so interesting. Whiston is from Igloo Ghost's Glue collective, alongside Igloo Ghost himself and Baby. I think a lot of people enjoyed the album that the three of them put out together in 2019, and since then, I've been paying a lot of attention to Whiston. I liked his also somewhat conceptual project, Drayen, about this alien child he carried with him to interviews. It was a really interesting time to be a fan. But God, he really one-upped himself on this in terms of conceptuality and creativity. This is a versatile but brash, very uncompromising, and quite experimental electronic music experience that I really enjoy, and the conceptuality of it is centered around Kai's own mother, who he cites as an influence for so much of his musical taste. So throughout this record, we are getting narration and dialogue and storytelling from Kai's mother, detailing the ways that she experienced some of these musical subcultures, and the implication is that that music was obviously passed down through to Kai, and then we actually hear some of these different genres and styles being manifested through the music on this record. It was an album that grabbed me at first for how creative and versatile and interesting its musical presentation is, but I really stuck around to listen to it over and over again and pull at some of the conceptual themes that it's working through. The narration here really is important. It is a crucial part of not only how Kai's musical palette came to be, but how he assembled all of that into this record. Just the fact that there's so much going on here, I think, is really cool and really interesting, and I spent more time breaking the details of this record down than I would have ever anticipated. And while we're talking electronica, please do not pass up the wonderfully long and indulgent The Consuming Flame from legendary, I suppose, sample-based, plunderphonics-driven experimental electronica project Matmos. Now, Matmos is no stranger to highly conceptual albums, to the point that it might be a turnoff to some people. they have often indulged in experiments of sampling a particular style or sound. Their legendary 2002 album, A Chance to Cut is a Chance to Cure, is full of samples of medical equipment. One of their most recent acclaimed projects in 2016 is literally full of washing machine samples, and a personal favorite of mine from a few years ago, Plastic Anniversary, is full of plastic samples. Now, this is not as sonically conceptual of an undertaking as the rest of those projects are, but it does have some really, really interesting conceptual ties that result in a bulk. This album is huge. It is extremely long, 3 discs, and the theme of it all is 99 beats per minute and 99 collaborators, which inherently gives this music a slightly off-kilter ethos surrounding it, and there are some pretty noteworthy collaborators that people will recognize, like Daveed Diggs of Clipping and One O Tricks Point Never, as well as dozens and dozens and dozens of more anonymous behind-the-scenes type collaborators, but the quality of musicians that are going into assembling this whole thing are just wonderful. And the huge variety of experiments that they go on as a result are really fascinating. I think even some people who are fans of Matmos may have skipped over this record. Even some people who may have heard some buzz around this album from critics on the internet, in particular Anthony Fantano over at The Needle Drop, may have seen this thing as too indulgent, too much as like a side project, not really a primary outing for Matmos. I really think those people should give this record a shot because it is some of their best material ever, frankly. And while, yes, it is extensively challenging due to its experimental nature and its length, it is handedly cut into 3 discs if you want to take it in bites, and ultimately it assembles into a ton of great, great, great music. Highly recommend this thing. If you want a musical challenge, this is one that is well worth undertaking. It's been a while since I said anything, but I should reiterate, Lululemon should still sponsor me because no one is doing more for the brand than me. The third record I want to talk about today comes to us from Sam Rae's Teen Suicide with the album Honeybee Table at the Butterfly Feast. Now, if you're anything like me, you might have some pretty fond memories of Teen Suicide and their whole Big Joyous Honeypot run for cover era back when I was a teenager and really into this band. And while I think for a lot of people they may not have followed through on what Teen Suicide has done on the near decade since, I think it is a worthwhile adventure to go on. After changing their name to American Pleasure Club and releasing 2 pretty underrated albums in their own right that I also recommend, they returned to the Teen Suicide moniker formally and properly last year with this absolutely wonderful new record. And while the lo-fi days that the music project has always been mired in is still present on a lot of these songs, this is a far more outside the box and far-reaching album than anything I think Teen Suicide has done before. During the band's time as American Pleasure Club, they continually built up ambitious and experimental building blocks, which I think they really paid off in a major way on this record. You are getting a versatile, extremely versatile collection of instrumentals backed by this very raw and indulgent lyrical flavor that Sam Rae has always been known for. There are points on this record that are strikingly intimate and earnest just for it to turn around and erupt in some sonically transcendent, ambitious noise right around the corner. It's a whirlwind of musical experience, but despite how chaotically all over the place the record is sonically, the songs here are consistently excellent. Just because of how directly the band appealed to people who are around my age when we were all teenagers, there's a pretty good chance that this is one of the records on the list that you may be most familiar with the artist's name. I don't think a whole ton of people has heard this record. It doesn't really have the streaming numbers or the rate your music chart placements that I would expect when I listen to this material and digest just how freaking good it is. And if you're coming at this list from a pop-oriented or even just a generally unexperimental, indie-oriented point of view as a listener, this is probably the record of the 5 I'm going to talk about today that will be the easiest for you to get into. So let's parlay that right into far and away the most difficult of all of these records to get into for any kind of casual listener, the brutal, blistering, extreme metal and noise metal outing from The Body, I've Seen All I Need to See. Now, fans of highly experimental metal music will already be very, very familiar with The Body. They have been around for a while. They are extremely prolific, have their fingers in a ton of musical side projects, as well as just releasing a lot of material as The Body and a lot of collaborative albums with bands like Full of Hell. And sometimes it can be so prolific that it's difficult to keep up with, especially when the records sometimes come with sonic motifs that are grating in the wrong way or just simply don't translate well, and an entire record can be written off as a result. And while I've seen some people say that about this album, to me, this is the best project that The Body have ever been a part of. And when I say extreme metal and noise metal, I really want you to know that I mean what I say. This is not hipster metal. This is not drone, but a little heavy. This thing is skull crushing. It starts off with this pretty haunting spoken word intro to the entire record on opening song A Lament, and then it is just one moment after another, distant, blistering screams and completely unattainable walls of thick, heavy fuzz. It is metallic, it is shrill, it is booming, it is difficult in so many ways, but so rewarding if you're seeking out an experience that will just bully you. In a sense, it kind of reminds me of the Little Women album, Throat, if you're familiar with that, though that is a little bit more of a chaotically dissonant, crushing experience where The Body are content to slam you to the ground repeatedly and constantly throughout the entire runtime of this album. I understand why this record is never going to top the charts or anything, obviously, but for fans of what is defensively often and unfairly called hipster metal bands, if you enjoy Chatpile or Panopticon or Krallis or Sun, do yourself a favor and check this record out, even if you have heard The Body before and think they might not be for you, because I didn't know they had this in their arsenal until I had this album on my ears. And finally, after a bunch of music dork jargon and thematically heavy subject matter, let's have a little fun in an insane way. And no one is having more insane fun right now than Jimmy Edgar. Now, if you're already familiar with Jimmy Edgar, it might be through a various remix of Someone Here or There, or because he was a Sophie collaborator, and his previous album in 2021 actually has a Sophie feature on the track, as well as features from Danny Brown and Matt Ox. Yep, and this new record, Liquid's Heaven, honestly kind of seeks to outdo it. Fundamentally, this album is about taking extremely strange collaborators, throwing them into this uncompromising electronic landscape and just letting them fucking cook. And it creates some absolutely insane moments, like the Z-Loopers feature on this thing's incredible 10K Cash song, the best song on the record, and I mean, Trinidad James on Bite That Too, what the hell? There really is a good way to describe the record. It makes me say what the hell constantly, but in a good way. Now, not all of these songs are insane fusions of hip-hop and disturbingly metallic electronic music. There are also some really synthetic PC music-esque pop ballads on here, just flushed with texture and sonic dissonance in the instrumentation, paired with some really sweet, genuinely soaring vocalists. I was actually compelled, after hearing this record, to dive into the discographies of some of the various collaborators I had never even heard of before. Yeah, this is just absolutely insane, crazy, dissonant, all over the place. It is such a brain fuzzing experience, but God, do I really enjoy it. This is one of the records from last year that I find myself coming back to the most, because it's hard to just even conceptualize anything like it. As a lot of what is conventionally considered hyperpop gets sugarier and more digestible, Jimmy Edgar is going in the exact opposite direction and making some of the most insanely uncompromising music I have heard recently. So that's it. Kai Whiston, Quiet as Kept, Matmos, Consuming Flame, Teen Suicide, Honeybee Table at the Butterfly Feast, The Body, I've Seen All I Need to See, and Jimmy Edgar's Liquid's Heaven. 5 albums I really enjoy. I like all of these. I reviewed them all. I gave them all very good reviews, and I think that they are underrated. If you listen to any of them, let me know what you think, and I will be back soon, hopefully, with a new sort of video essay analysis type bit like the Cloud Dead one. And then at the end of the next month, we will be doing what is always the most popular feature on this channel, talking about the best albums of 2023 so far. Something to look forward to. See you there.